podcast where we highlight Canadian innovators who are changing the game. I'm Sapna Malhotra, your proud Canadian host. I want to thank everyone for all these great, amazing reviews and ratings. I am so honestly touched. We even got a couple of ratings and reviews from people in the UK and the USA, so please thank you very much and keep on coming. We are at the mercy of the Apple gurus, so we definitely need to continue to get some more ratings and reviews. And if you send me a screenshot of it, I will actually send you a coffee from Coffees on Me. I record these episodes early and then add intros and outros closer to when we launch the episode. After this particular recording, WeWork Canada and I ended up chatting about how they really provide an amazing ecosystem to support entrepreneurs and innovators both locally and globally. The result is that I'm really happy and honored to announce that WeWork Canada has become the official Can Innovate podcast sponsor. Our values and mission are very, very similar. In fact, this episode around the feedback app with Ben was scheduled to be a little later, but I thought this was the perfect episode to announce a sponsorship as it truly demonstrates the supportive community that WeWork provides. This whole banter that you're about to hear is by total accident. It was just part of the natural conversation. For those that are unfamiliar with WeWork, WeWork is a community of creators that aims to help companies grow by providing them with not just beautiful space, but also the benefits, amenities, and a professional community that they really need in order to focus on building their business. They have spaces globally and in Canada. They now even have 2 locations in Toronto, offices that have opened up in Vancouver and Montreal. Visit WeWork.com for more information, and you can even book a tour. Now, they have great coffee, and you know I do love my coffee. They have hot chocolate for those cold days, and even beer on tap. Along with also being part of that WeWork global family, they have tons, and I mean tons, of different networking and learning sessions on a variety of topics. I'll put the links in the show notes below, but if you're looking for a community to be part of, this one I highly recommend. Now, as promised, in episode 5, I was going to give you an episode that was going to melt your heart. And this one really will. We are chatting with Ben Walters, the CEO and co-founder of the Feedback app, and he's going to show us how he managed to find the right win-win-win business model, some great startup tools that we should definitely leverage, and how he's on a mission to help reduce billions of dollars of wasted food. So episode 5, the Feedback app where everyone wins. We have Ben Walters, the CEO and co-founder of the Feedback app. Ben actually graduated from McGill University, where he worked primarily in the U.S. in the management consulting space. Now, Ben was doing quite well financially, but he felt like he was missing something and eventually developed the concept of the Feedback app with his cousin and co-founder, Josh. Hi, Ben. Did I miss anything in the intro?
No, that was perfect, Sapna.
Excellent. So I actually did some reading when I was prepping for our interview. And I recently read in Blog.to that you and your cousin rescued a whole bunch of flowers that were going to be thrown out following an event, and you handed them out in front of the Sick Kids Hospital and Mount Sinai Hospital.
Yes, that's true, indeed.
Wow, that's a level of kindness and generosity that seems to be flowing in, your blood, your DNA, you and your cousin. So this is fantastic.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That was actually a funny story. When we were originally conceptualizing feedback and what we wanted to do, people kept saying to us, hey, what about our flowers? There were flower shops that were reaching out who felt that there was tons of flowers going to waste. And so we realized that the theme of it's a shame beautiful things have to go to waste resonated with people separate and apart from just food. And so we took on the initiative to go rescue a bunch of flowers and do some good with them.
Oh, that is such a great, great story. I love that. When I read it, I was just like, oh my gosh, I gotta mention that for sure on the interview. But so Ben, tell us about this Feedback app. How did this idea and inspiration all come about? And what exactly is it for those that are not familiar with it?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the inspiration. So my cousin and co-founder, Josh, was over on exchange in Italy last summer. It was last July, actually. And he had one of those sort of out of a movie aha moments walking into a pizzeria late at night with some friends. They were looking to just grab a slice, and the restaurant owner or the pizzeria owner offered them 3 full pizzas for about $10. And of course, being students at the time, they said, of course, and ended up eating delicious cold pizza for the next 3 days. And over a few of those cold pizza lunches, Josh started thinking that must be happening all over the place all the time, where restaurant owners had overproduced food. They had made a little too much. And they ended up having to either throw that food out or find a way to get rid of it. And Josh realized that there must be tons of restaurant owners facing that problem, yet tons of consumers like himself who would be more than willing to buy that food at a discounted price and enjoy it. And so he gave me a call that summer and sort of in a rush explained what happened and the idea and what he started thinking about. And I couldn't get it out of my head. I was, like you said, working in management consulting at the time, living in and out of hotels. And it's a great place to really see the levels of waste that are all around us. I never remember what the actual phenomenon is called, but you know when a friend mentions a movie or a book, and then all of a sudden you start seeing that movie or book everywhere around you. And that's really what happened after that first phone call with Josh. I just started seeing these mounds of waste everywhere around me. And so we started looking around the world for inspiration. And we found some really cool companies doing things or trying to solve this massive problem of food waste. One in particular actually over in Denmark called Too Good To Go. And we reached out to them and spoke with them back and forth. And we're even thinking about finding some sort of partnership. But we both realized that it was best to go our separate ways as we were dealing with different customers and different markets. And we were just too far apart. And that was the start of the Feedback app. And we just launched a few weeks ago. And while the product has changed many times over, the idea is that restaurants, particularly quick service restaurants, throw out a ton of food and are generally just inefficient. They do 80% of their volume or sell 80% of their food in a couple hours throughout the day during lunch and dinner, meaning that they have lots of lull times and there is lots of food that goes to waste. And so what we do is we tap into those restaurant inefficiencies in order to offer the same great food for less to our consumers while helping restaurants reduce waste and also having a big give back component.
So I actually heard somewhere that Canadians, and I may be wrong about this, that Canadians waste billions of dollars in food each year.
Yeah, so the numbers are astronomical, Sapna. The number, in fact, it was 2015, so it's probably grown since then. But in 2015, there was a great research report that found that $31 billion of food each year is wasted. But to me, at least, that's a hard number to really internalize and understand. The one that really hit home for me was finding out that nearly 40% of all food produced is thrown out or wasted at some point in the process. So that means that out of every 100 pounds of apples or 100 pounds of meat that are produced, 40% of that ends up in the garbage. And that to me is just a very, very sad tale. And it's something that we all need to do something about.
No, this is great. I mean, I think this is so perfect. Even yesterday, I was at my favorite coffee shop and I was trying to get this. I've got this thing for spinach and feta, and he was saying that we close at 5, at 6 o'clock, and we actually 50% off goes at 5 o'clock. He's like, I wish there was a way, and I was like, I've got someone you need to meet.
Yeah.
It's just the perfect timing.
Exactly. Those end of day sales are a great way to simply explain what we do, as what we're doing is consolidating all of those end of day sales, as well as offering unique different promotions throughout the days for restaurants in order to help drive traffic at off peak times.
Yeah, this is amazing. So tell me, how this idea is so big and yet so simple and so full of heart. How did you get this idea off the ground? Like, how did you move it from an idea to a concept? And
yeah, that's always the hard one. So the truth is that looking back, and listen, hindsight's always 20/20, but looking back, it took me longer than I would have hoped to really jump ship and sink my teeth into this. I had that first call, as I mentioned, in July with Josh. We spent a lot of time speaking to people around the world, doing a little bit of market research ourselves. By January, we had a couple sales reps who were just fully commissioned, trying to speak to restaurant owners because, again, I was in the US primarily. And it wasn't until April when I finally gained the courage to really jump ship from the corporate job and the safety and cushion that comes with it, and really jump into this full time. And at that time, obviously, all you have is a dream and a vision. And we really wanted to make sure that we figured out how this all worked and gained some traction before we went out to market and potentially raise money to grow. So it was fully bootstrapped. I was a pretty good saver over my 4 years or so, and I have sunk more or less everything I've got into feedback. And to date, we have won a little bit of money through some pitch contests. One big one in particular was from WeWork, actually, who gave us $50,000 and free office space, or not free, but discounted office space for a year, which has been tremendously helpful for us. But right now, it's the dollars and cents that I've been saving over the last 4 years going into this. Yeah, I believe I'm under the belief, and it feels like I'm in the minority right now with the way that this sort of tech bubble and startup bubble is going, that VC money should be a last case scenario. I think everyone's goal should be to do it themselves and own 100% of their company, like the Sarah Blakeleys of the world. And yet it feels like every single person, as soon as either something goes wrong or sometimes even before that, their goal is to raise money. And to me, it's a little bit backwards.
I'm with you. I've talked to quite a few different innovators, and they have said very similar things like, getting VC money, everyone seems to be on the hunt for VC and investment and angel investors, but being bootstrapped is the best amount of control. Plus, you get to test early, and you tend to test earlier with your clients and pivot faster than anything else, because not only is your heart and soul in this, your finances are built into this.
For sure.
And so you are out there more.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt, Sapna. Like we're all in. We're absolutely all in. There's no comfort or fallback at all. And at the beginning, it may feel like you can move a little slower, but I would even argue that you're a little bit more agile. There's a little bit more of that sense of urgency, and a lot of good can come out of that. And you know what the other thing is that like raising money, especially in Canada, is a tough task. And if you speak to people who have gone through raising from institutional investors, they will tell you that it is really a full-time job. So how a small company like Feedback could have 1 out of 3 or 4 employees spending their full-time job trying to raise money instead of pushing the envelope forward, I just don't get it. It doesn't add up to me. If I wasn't working 100% of my time on growing Feedback, then Feedback wouldn't be anything right now. And so that's the sort of dilemma that is a tough one to balance.
No, that's really wise insights, and I'm definitely going to highlight some of those things, especially in the show notes, because I think people really need to learn that. And it's so interesting that you've learned this at such a young, I'm guessing you're very young, age. I guess, it's just, all I can feel when I speak to you is your heart and the passion that comes with it, and that's very hard to come by. And so I'm beyond inspired by you.
Well, I appreciate that, Sapna. I've got a lot of great mentors who have helped out along the way.
See, this mentor thing always shows up somewhere. But one of the things we haven't actually talked about the feedback, so I love it. Basically, I, as a consumer, get to enjoy discounted food at off-peak times. And is there any other conditions for me itself?
Yeah, so there's a couple unique promotions that we're, let's call it, experimenting with. But like you said, the idea is it's a food ordering app. You go onto your phone, you have the Feedback app, you search through restaurants close to you, usually sorted by distance. They all have restrictions in terms of when they offer promotions. So the idea being that restaurants who throw out food generally like to run a promotion in the last hour or 2 hours of their store hours. Restaurants who are generally empty between the lunch and dinner rush like to run promotions between that 2 to 6 p.m. window. And so as long as you're a little bit flexible in terms of when you're willing to eat, there's really no other catch and no downside. You're saving money, you're getting the same great food, and you're also helping through our in-app rewards program, which is actually matches purchases with meal donations. Second Harvest is one of our biggest partners. And we have an in-app rewards program. Instead of giving what I will call useless loyalty points or maybe a couple dollars off your next purchase, which is great, we're trying to really make a difference. And so for September and October, actually, every single meal you purchase is matched with a meal donation to Second Harvest through us. But like you said, so the only other, I guess, sometimes catch is that some of the restaurants who are throwing out lots of food, instead of having to manage inventory in the background, we wanted to make it really easy for restaurants to partner with us. So what they'll do is they'll make categories of food available. They'll say, hey, we're throwing out about 10 to 15 pastries. I'm not going to go into the app and update if it's an almond croissant or a chocolate croissant or maybe even a chocolate chip muffin, but I'm willing to sell you a pastry at a highly, highly discounted price. When you show up, you get to pick out of all the pastries that we have left, but you're not necessarily guaranteed a specific item. Now, it is important to say that that's really a fraction of our restaurants. Most of them are selling specific items, but some of them, and they're offering heavier discounts, are using the app to sell a category of food to help them make sure that they get rid of all of their inventory.
I, as a customer, I get a discount for it at eating off peak time, which I eat off peak times most of the time anyways, just because our days are crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Restaurants reduce waste, so we're doing something really environmentally and, really socially good. And then you're totally donating food to every time someone takes advantage of something, there's food that's being donated. This is truly...
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Win-win-win. You know who else I think would love this? All the students. I think about all the students constantly eating at off-peak times. Classes, studies, exams.
Absolutely. So it's funny you say that, Sabna. First of all, the win-win-win really is like the core foundation of feedback. It is what we stand on, what we believe in. If you had to ask me our core value, our number one core value, it is the win-win-win. We're brought up in North America, and I think one of the flaws is that we're taught that a win comes at someone else's expense. One team wins, one team loses. One player wins, one team loses. And I think that penetrates the way that we sort of act and carry ourselves in society. But what we're trying to do at Feedback is explain and demonstrate that the best solution is one in which everyone wins, and everyone can win in any given situation. And so the win-win-win is, it's very fundamental to Feedback. And so on the student side, our focus right now actually is doing exactly that. We are hammering the streets around Ryerson, UFT, George Brown, to really get a lot of restaurants in the student area, because we realize they are a great target for us. Our generation, I'm gonna group myself in that generation. We're the first ones. Yes, we're entitled. We can be a little bit bratty. There's absolutely no doubt. But we really are the first generation who really cares. We care about giving back. We care about making a difference. And so I think I know feedback from so far, the input we've gotten so far really resonates with that student population. And then, like you said, as well, they're eating at all hours of the day. So it's a great target to address the student population.
I love it. Well, I'd be honored, and I'm happy to be one of your change agents and help you with some of those restaurants. So let me know if you need some help, because I think this is just something I totally stand behind, and I'm sure a lot of others will stand behind you too.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sabna, and I'll definitely take you up on that.
Done. So let's kind of pivot a bit more to talk about being a startup venture in Canada. I mean, we touched base a little about being bootstrapped and about VC money and so on. Have you had any other kind of lessons that you've learned being a startup venture in Canada? Any aha moments?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's a really interesting time to be a startup in Canada, because we're in that heavy growth phase. Like you look at WeWork as a great example. So WeWork is shared office space. They have, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's 44 offices in Manhattan, New York alone. And yet Toronto, Canada, by far the biggest city in Canada, just got our first WeWork office in August. Mm-hmm. And so we were a little bit behind, and that's because of the conservative nature of Canadians. And so what's been really fun for me is to see, even in the last few months, how much this is changing. There are huge tech events and startup events. It feels like every single day that you can go to, and there's great speakers and great people to really hear from and tap into. But it does feel like we're still sort of learning as we go. I think WeWork, again, is a great example. The office is incredible. The culture is amazing. But at the beginning, everyone was walking on thin ice a little. We were all sort of looking around being like, how do we do this? We don't really know how to do this whole startup thing, but you can feel us learning really quick. So I think one of the things that's going to catch up is sort of some of that government spending. I know that there is lots of money and grants out there. They're very difficult to get to. There's not a lot of transparency. And we ourselves have spent a lot of time digging into some great initiatives like the Smart Start, OCE Smart Start, and there's also the Mars Innovation Zone and everything that goes on in Mars. But there isn't enough transparency right now in terms of receiving grants and that mentorship that I believe does really spur the startup culture in a lot of other places. And so, yeah, it's fun to be a part of. It's fun to be involved in, and I can see it getting better every single day. But we definitely are a little bit behind, and I always go back to the sort of conservative nature of Canadians to point that towards.
No, that's great. I know that you mentioned like the Smart Starts and the Mars Innovation Zone and the grants. Grants are hard to get to. Is there anything else that you kind of wish that you had at your fingertips that you could have leveraged of some sort of tools?
Yeah, like the easy answer is money. So money would always really help. We actually haven't gotten ourselves any government funding at all, and we're a social enterprise trying to do a lot of good. We're a young group of guys and now females as well, and it would be great to get a little bit of help on that front, of course, but I do think that's a little bit of a cop-out answer. I think really it always for me comes down to transparency. I wish I knew what was out there, and being that we're always balancing so many things and trying to do so many things and putting on so many different hats, if there was one place to really go to understand what was out there and the tools and resources, it would be tremendously helpful instead of having to dig into them ourselves.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple of times. It's kind of hard to navigate.
Right. Exactly. A centralized resource would be incredible.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I am totally with you. And now, being that you've done this now, is there any advice that you would give to any aspiring or budding Canadian innovators that are trying to get their own idea or concept launched?
Yeah, so I think that accelerators are a great route to go, and incubators are a great route to go. And not necessarily the ones like the Y Combinators and Techstars of the world where you give up equity and get into like a 3-month intensive program. Although those are good as well, everyone I recommend really dive into it and make sure they're right for them. But what I do think is something that every single, especially Toronto-based, but really Canadian innovator entrepreneur should look into is some of the resources provided by Ryerson and sort of the DMZ zones. We, like I said, had gone to Ryerson very early on and pitched them, and we were pre-revenue, so we weren't ready to actually get into the DMZ zone. But what they did do is they passed us on to some of their, they call them like co-zones or offshoot zones. And we immediately became a part of the science discovery zone and the social venture zone, which have provided some workspace, some great resources, as well as really kept us in the loop and on the pulse on what's going on in the city, both from pitch contests to grants. They have caffeinated innovator talks every Friday. There's really lots of great stuff going on, and it's an amazing resource that really provides a lot of insights and advice to early entrepreneurs and startups.
I'm going to put some of those links in the show notes as well about the Ryerson DMZ and all those different pieces.
Yeah, no, Ryerson is doing some really, really amazing things and deserve a big shout out.
So, Ben, you really truly are an inspiration. You're creating such positive social impact. I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. I know that you play team sports and yoga, and you used to travel when you had money. Do you have any key business philosophies or quotes, something that helps you keep focused?
Yeah, so the big one for me, Sabna, and a lot of people, which has been so cool. And listen, first I will say I appreciate you calling me an inspiration. We haven't done anything yet. We've launched a product, we've gotten some good press, but this is like step one of a long, long journey in front of us. But what I will say is a lot of people come to me and say, okay, so you were in a cushy job that sounded great. Like, what gave you the courage to take the leap? And I always go back to my mindset when I finally made the jump. And like I said and admitted, it took me longer than I may have hoped. But what I realized in that moment, being, as you called me out, being young, was that now is the time. And that I really was able to get to the realization that win or lose, and that's the important part, that I was fully okay and accepted the fact that if this doesn't work out, if we fall flat on our face, that failure is going to be the best thing that happens to us. I think if you look at any successful people out there, they will all tell you that failing is one of the best things that happen to them and that everyone needs to fail in their lifetime. And so I was lucky to have a pretty smooth path. I graduated from McGill. I got a cool job with Anheuser-Busch InBev. I worked in management consulting. Things were going well. but I hadn't really fallen flat on my face. And I realized that taking the leap, yes, of course, the dream is to make this a great success. And I'm not just defining success as the dollars and cents. That's not really the important part, but really make a huge impact. But if not, I was going to be okay. I was going to learn a lot, which I have already done. I would make a lot of great connections. And I knew that whether or not this worked out, I was going to look back and say that I would have done it 10 times out of 10 over and over again. And so to like summarize that in one great quote, it was the Kennedys that was one that I always turn to, which is those who dare to fail miserably can achieve greatly. And I really do believe that. I really believe that you need to go after it and take the leap and be okay with whatever the result and know that you're going to be able to get back up on your feet and make something happen. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of taking big swings and seeing what happens.
That's amazing. And when I called you young, it's more for me being envious that I wish I had your heart and passion. I wish I had identified the heart and passion 10 years earlier. And the fact that you've identified and you have that self-awareness is just astonishing to me. So for me, that's another huge source of inspiration.
I appreciate that, Sapna.
So I think that's brilliant beyond belief. Okay, so I struggle with trying to stay productive. So I'm always constantly searching for new productivity tools. So do you have some sort of tool that you use to kind of juggle it all?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a really cool one called Pulse. They actually changed their name, I believe, to Monday recently. And it's the best project management tool that I've really seen out there. Very, very flexible. It's like, I don't know if you know Asana or Trello. There's lots out there, but Pulse has been our favorite to use. But I agree with you. It is hard to sometimes remember to go in and update it and get the most value out of it. To be honest, the way that I do it, and all my co-founders and now the people working with us and employees will find hilarious, is I use Siri a lot to give myself reminders. My calendar is jam-packed always. Everything from, hey, you have a meeting, but also like, remember to follow up with this person, remember to follow up with that person. I use my calendar obsessively to remind myself to do things, because with so many things going on, it's really easy for things to fall through the cracks. And so whether it's asking Siri to remind me things on specific dates or at specific times, or throwing in invites in my calendar, I document absolutely everything that I want to remind myself to do, because I know otherwise there's a great risk of missing it. And that's really how I try to stay on top of things the best that I can.
I love that. And this afternoon when I come and see you at WeWork, you're going to have to show me how to make sure I use the Siri thing, because that sounds phenomenal.
I'd be happy to.
So do you have a favorite business book or podcast that you're either currently listening to, or you recommend that something's inspired you?
Yeah, sure. So how I built this, I think it's probably a pretty cliche one at this point, but how I built this is really an incredible podcast. It's inspiring. It's so great to hear the stories. And of course, I will say this with a grain of salt, or it's important that everyone take it with a grain of salt. All you're listening to is those 0.0001% of really successful stories. So it's not always the best if you're going through some tough times and struggling, but it is great to hear that everyone really has gone through those times to get to where they are. And I loved how I built this and listened to it all the time. That was a big one. For me, there's also some great books out there that I've gotten my hands on, just really to stay present, which is a hard thing to do when there's so many things going on. I've been reading a lot of Eckhart Tolle and John Kabat-Zinn, who are bring mindfulness sort of to the mainstream. I've found those books have been incredible for me going through all of this, to really remember to stay present. And that the whole fun of this and why I did this is the journey and not necessarily the end goal. I think it's really a big issue with our society, is that everyone's looking for that sort of fulfillment and satisfaction from what's to come and what they're going to achieve, instead of realizing that appreciate and enjoy the moment you're in right now. You're going to end up 80 years from now, or however many years from now, sitting on your deathbed being like, what was I chasing? And so, yeah, the power of now, and wherever you go, there you are books that have had as of late. And I recommend them to any entrepreneurs, startups out there. Very different than the sort of productivity books that you can read. Although Pitch It is a great one. Pitch It is a really good one if you want to learn how to pitch your business and stuff. But I really believe that getting yourself in the right mindset is one of the biggest things and most overlooked things that a lot of entrepreneurs forget to do.
No, that's great. This is really good. So I'll put all those in the show notes for all the listeners that are out there. And do you have a personal habit that you kind of utilize to stay productive and keep moving?
Yeah, so along those lines, meditation is one. You can find me in the phone booth for 15 minutes every morning at WeWork, giving my brain a little detox, sitting in silence. And sometimes I use an app called Calm, which I like a lot, similar to Headspace, but I've enjoyed it a little bit more. So that's one thing that I do every morning just to give myself a break, even though I am always jumping from thing to thing to thing. I always give myself 15 minutes to just sit. But the other thing that's really been great for me is biking. I live downtown, and so it doesn't make sense to really own a car anyways. But the bike riding for me has been just a few seconds for me to just relax. It's been incredible for me to get into the right mindset. I bike to work and bike to all my meetings. And what I started doing recently is biking through Trinity Bellwoods, both to and from work every single day. Even though it's just a minute or so, it really just calms me down and relaxes me a lot. And I'm a big bike rider and I enjoy it a lot.
Oh, that's awesome. So when you do have some downtime, which doesn't sound like you have a lot of it, is there a favorite Canadian hotspot, hideaway, a delight that you like?
To be honest, I don't get a lot of downtime, or I haven't as of late. Trinity Bellwoods is my place. I try to stop there, and there's one particular bench that I just sit and relax on quite often. What's so cool about our city is that it's expanding in all directions at all times. And 8 or 9 years ago, Trinity Bellwoods was a crack park, to be honest. And you would never catch yourself there. And now it's one of the hottest spots in Toronto. And whenever I get time, I love going for a walk with my girlfriend and through Trinity Bellwoods and sitting on a park bench and relaxing and just taking it all in for a second.
I love that. Just to let you know, I used to live in that area when it was a crack house. 10 years ago. That's when I originally moved to England. That's where I was living before I moved. So yes, I'm very familiar with how much that area has revitalized. And finally,
it's really incredible.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And finally, how can our listeners connect with you and contact you?
I'm always looking to connect, Sapna. I was so glad you reached out to me a few weeks ago, and I'm so glad that we're doing this now. My cell phone number, to be very transparent, is 416-805-7771. Always open for a phone call. And also, it will probably be easier to reach me just over email, which is ben@feedbackapp.ca. Actually, I want to respond to anyone and everyone who wants to reach out, whether it's to grab a coffee or a beer. I can't promise it will be immediately, but I can promise it will be as soon as possible. And I really do love connecting with anyone and everyone. Because I feel really lucky to be where I am right now. And if I can help anyone or gain some insights and pick the brains of some incredibly experienced veterans out there, I've always got a few minutes to do so.
Excellent. Well, you know what? I'm definitely going to take you up on that. I'm going to hit you up this afternoon at WeWork, and I'm going to try to hit us for Tequila Shot Friday. And anyways, but yeah, seriously, Ben, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really think your app is amazing, and what you're doing is really changing the conversation, and that's why I reached out to you, because I just think it's just one of the best things, and it's a great story. So
well, I really appreciate that, Sapna, and I wouldn't be doing my job if there wasn't a little call to action here. So I do ask all listeners to check us out for themselves and go download the Feedback app from iOS or the Google Play Store. We right now have about 45 restaurants in downtown Toronto. We're expanding that number every single day. If people have recommendations of restaurants they want us to get into, that's really helpful for us. And even if you're in Mississauga or whether it be Vancouver, wherever you are, we're coming to you. So be patient with us. And again, we're hoping to get more restaurants everywhere.
Well, hear that, guys? You hear the call to action. So nominate your favorite restaurant, download it, because honestly, I've already downloaded and I've used it already. Make sure you do it. Let's support these guys and help them expand across Canada, because we got to get this number down from $31 billion food waste. We need to help reduce that. We are the most recycle-friendly people in the world. So let's do it. I'm all for it.
Amen, Sam. Let's do it.
Cheers, Ben. That was awesome.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you again for joining us this week. I recognize that time is a valuable and precious commodity, and I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Would love to hear from you. You can even join our Facebook page and continue the conversation. Next week, we'll be chatting with Rob Catalano from WorkTango, and he'll be telling us how they finally have figured out a software that's going to give employees a voice and companies actionable insight to actually drive those revenues, which is timely as we're getting ready for the year-end reviews. And a big thank you to WeWork Canada for becoming our official podcast sponsor. Definitely visit their website at wework.com and you can book a tour. I've put the link in the show notes below. And share this podcast with your friends and family. We are getting close to the season of giving. And of course, leave a review and nominate Canadian Innovator. And send me that screenshot of your review and I'll send you a copy. Remember, this is our podcast and I'm looking forward to chatting with you next week.